Well, here we are back. I'm in Seattle. You would know that from the sun. Don't normally rock just the tank top on the podcast, but got back to the house about 2:30 in the morning. Back here at 9 a.m. Pacific. No days off here. I know listener Jared has it worse. I think still in Houston. Jared, if you're listening, call in. We'll do a standby here later in the show. But busy times. Another busy guy I have. I was just drinking Schreinerbach with him on the Riverwalk not 24 hours ago. Andy Murray, how are you doing, sir?
I was about to say, did I see you somewhere recently? I'm not sure. I can't quite remember. But it's been quite the roller coaster. I'm glad that you were able to get out. I've been hearing the same thing. It's been a little bit of a cluster for some people trying to get out just out of the Texas area. So I guess escaping is a victory in itself.
Yeah, just sharing this. Jared, Jared was on the Alamo tour with us. Jared stuck at the airport. I had to sleep at the Houston airport. So I know I was at the San Antonio airport with the mayor and with Haley from the Sea Dragons. And Haley tweeted out walking out of the SeaTac airport at 1:45 in the morning after being delayed for 4 hours following the XFL Championship game is really the kind of the cherry on the top. I don't know if that was an insult to me. Like, oh, I got my last moments were with Reed walking out of the building, but that was good. I will say though, and we'll get to all the XFL championship stuff today. Jen is checking in here. Good morning from Southern California. Greatest thing today, and I mean this, waking up about 45 minutes ago to just the wall of this player signed, this player signed, this player signed. We have 6 players so far signed from the XFL. Haley had hinted at that last night. We were talking because obviously, the Ben DiNucci comment came up, and she said, "Yeah, there's wouldn't be surprised if we had some more here rolling out. It's really just day one. They're able to sign now. I know we had a bunch of camp tryouts and everything, but May 15th is the day that they're able to do that. Andy, what did you make of the signings? I'll pull up real quick. We'll get to all the championship stuff, but we'll pull up analysts, XFL analysts tweet just because he's got the most concise thing. DiNucci to the Broncos, Barry Wesley to the Falcons, Bryce Thompson to the Dolphins, all those from Seattle, Jacques Patrick to the Broncos from San Antonio, Lucas Dennis to the Falcons from St. Louis, and CJ Brewer to the Buccaneers.
Yeah, these are some solid pickups already. I already like Ben DiNucci, obviously one of the most talked about players of the entire season. A lot of people that even NFL fans are already familiar with, obviously with his time with the Cowboys, already playing a primetime game. I think the Broncos is a great fit for him just because their quarterback depth has been a little bit lacking in the last few years. Even behind Russell Wilson, it's not always been the most outstanding. One of our colleagues, Matt Nagashima, was pointing out that Jarrett Guarantano was one of the third stringers, and he was picked up last season. And he's not necessarily guaranteed a roster spot. So I think DiNucci has a really good chance coming in here at camp and making an impression with this coaching staff. And I mean, look, if Sean Payton likes you, that's a huge deal, right? Sean Payton clearly being interested in XFL players. He picked up 2 of them already, so that says a lot. If Mr. Payton is already interested in you, Jacques Patrick, I said it during the season. Jacques Patrick should have been starting from day one for San Antonio. Kalen Ballage is fine, but Jacques Patrick was by far the best running back option for that team. The Broncos, again, picking him up. That's wonderful for him. See if he gets some burn. I love Barry Wesley going to the Falcons, giving a little more line depth there for an offense that's trying to piece itself back together. Obviously, they're sort of a rebuilding operation. Bryce Thompson, that's awesome for the Dolphins. Look, I mean, we don't know the status with someone like Xavier Howard or some of the other defensive pieces in the backfield. That's great for them. Lucas Dennis, also the Falcons. That's good. So 2 of these teams picking up 2 players already. So already multiples of XFL players going to the same team, which is also great. And then CJ Brewer going to the Buccaneers, which traditionally has had pretty good defensive line depth, but they're also kind of in a transition period now from the Tom Brady era. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that these signings are coming in. I expect more to be the case just even by noon Pacific time today because, look, the gates are open now. All these guys can start signing. It's not just camp invites. Obviously, the championship players now have more free reign. The Arlington and D.C. players we'll start to see flooding in here. So, yeah, I'm not surprised by this so far.
I was looking to find, and I'll just pull up his Twitter because I was trying to find, Matt must have posted it as a comment on one of them over here, Matt Lyons. where he said, if I had a nickel for every time, what was it? Every time Denver Broncos, signed the Seattle quarterback, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it still is interesting. So, Matt doing the Lord's work. Matt's writing these articles, Fast and Furious, out for, with Mark over at News Sub. So go check that out. All the News Sub guys, obviously the work doesn't stop now. I know Greg Parks is going to be doing that as well, tracking all of that. So it's just exciting. Like I've said, and that is kind of the one thing right now USFL brass really holds firm. And obviously, I want players to succeed from any league, but I feel like I was wrong last year when I thought the April to July was the better time frame. I think this will be much better, and hopefully, getting players in May versus July a chance to kind of get assimilated with the with the training camps and all of that. Any other updated thoughts on that? And then we'll get to some comments here before we go to the recap.
No, I agree. I think just having a chance to get in the building early and really being able to learn the playbook and be able to practice with some of these other players that have been drafted, the undrafted free agents, some of these other people who have been signed, the mini camps, OTAs are really important, crucial period. They may not be as important for some of the veteran players. The established stars don't necessarily have to be there. It's more important for people who are trying to establish themselves and just trying to get their footing in this league. So, yeah, I think the timeline from that standpoint really helps them as far as being able to have that knowledge going into training camp in July and then preparing themselves for preseason action, which obviously is going to be pretty busy for all of us because now we have just a slew of players to follow now, XFL and USFL both. And, it may be some CFL players mixed in there too, IFL, there's just the more these leagues happen, the more players and more persons that you get familiar with, the more you start to follow and really invest in some of these preseason games. Cause it's like, well, I've watched a lot of these guys play now, these aren't just some college player from some community college or some like Division III school that I didn't watch during the season. No, these are guys that played real, like professional football in a lot of different leagues, or maybe just you've seen them on TV. That's what I'm saying. Like they've gotten the exposure. So yeah, it starts to become more important that way too.
Yeah, so we have here JJKK Bob Stoops for president. We have a lot of Arlington. Obviously, Jenna told us all year. She said the
She did.
Arlington Renegades will win the championship. Mike congratulated Jenna. So excited. I mean, Jenna, obviously COVID, and I know Jenna, it was hard for all of us back with all that. I know that Jenna has been cursed with her love of the Red Blacks, the Buffalo Sabres in the NHL, not always doing the greatest. So, obviously the Dallas Cowboys, good to see an Arlington franchise actually winning a title. Someone posted the Drake showing like, this is what you do for the playoffs. This is what the Arlington Renegades need to show. And James Baker, a complete turnaround from week 1. So lots of comments here. I'll keep flashing some more up. We'll get to the game. We did our live show. If you haven't seen that, obviously, encourage. I think we had like 1,800 viewers now. It's never as good as I want. It's never as, bad as I fear. But, it was good. What did you make overall San Antonio hosting? I don't know if we will ever do that again just because of the outlash from St. Louis and all that. But what did you make of just the weekend as a whole?
I love that I finally got to experience San Antonio. What a great town. And just historical vibes. The atmosphere, the river walk was wonderful. The people were friendly. I really enjoyed San Antonio. I've been wanting to go there for so long, not just for football reasons, just to go there in general. I've really wanted to experience it. The thing I take away from it is that it doesn't feel like a Texas town. Does that make sense? Like it feels a little bit kind of removed from just the normal, I guess, my premonitions of what a Texas town would be. And I've been to Houston, I've been to Dallas, I've been to San Antonio. The only big one I haven't been to yet now is Austin. But yeah, no, San Antonio was a great hosting site. The Alamo Dome was awesome, great venue. Again, like I said, just the overall atmosphere of the entire place was fantastic. I think for hosting a championship game, I think it was a good pick. It was a very solid pick for the first inaugural game. We were talking about on the stream, like what are some other venues? One that I should have mentioned that I think will definitely be a play later on outside of St. Louis is probably Orlando. I would think that Danny Garcia wants to get in her hometown. Like that's going to be a huge get for her if they get into Orlando and are able to sort of start to fill Camping World Stadium, which I assume they were going to use that stadium. But yeah, no, really impressed with San Antonio. I loved it. I enjoyed it so much. And I'm glad we got to do the river tour as well. We did that after the game too. That was really fun.
Yeah, well, Andy, I'm putting up here, James Baker, am I the only one, like, Kevin Anderson, I didn't mean to put this one up right now, but yeah, it was weird. Kevin, I think, was just kind of the locker room leader for the Renegades. He's, I think, more of kind of a coach mentor at this point. Anything on that? I was gonna pull up our wonderful Alamo tour picture that we did. I don't think I showed this during the live stream. I don't know if I had the ability to do that, but obviously yourself, and we had Anthony here, we had Fran over with Our Sports Central, we had listener Nate, and then Jared, who is currently stuck in. So yeah, lots to do. Orlando feels far, right? Texas feels centralized. I imagine if it wasn't the rugby game going on at Choctaw, it probably just would have been at the hub there. It is a little more spread out. I do like San Antonio that you can stay near the Riverwalk and everything's really there. I mean, you even talked about that, the kind of walkability of that and getting fans in. Because I was surprised, and we were surprised to see a lot of DC fans traveling in, as well as obviously Arlington coming up, from Arlington fans coming up from Arlington to San Antonio.
Yeah, the proximity was great, and also the amenities were really important. I mean, the Alamo Dome was an 18-minute walk from my hotel. The Riverwalk was a 5-minute walk. The airport was really not that far away. I took the bus in, and then I took an Uber back, and it really was pretty seamless. Honestly, like getting in and out was really easy, and that's for me. That's becoming more and more important as I get older. I really start to criticize and sort of like look at different venues and think like, okay, what's around the stadium? What's going on? Like, is there something you can do? How hard is it to travel there? Like that matters a lot for, look, we're all maniacs here. We all follow this religiously. We are the niche of the niche because there are more casual people who need, more, they need more if they're going to be attracted to that location and to that venue. So I think for San Antonio, it was great because just everything was so close to there. Really what I took away from it is just how much that town transformed over the last 50 years and after like the World's Fair in like, what was it, 1968, and a couple of the other historical facts we learned. But just everything is just like so close proximity, which again is awesome because now it's easier for people to kind of use it as like just an example of keeping everything tight and everything in close proximity because the farther you have to travel or something, the more cumbersome it is, and some people don't want to deal with that. I get it. I like I said, that's something that I always think about every time I travel somewhere. Like, okay, how much time is it going to take for me to get to this spot over here, and then have to go from here? Just logistics are important. They really are.
I could see them wanting to do Audi Field in the future, but again, East Coast really far. WWE has various results because it is a very similar vibe. You eventually, I know they did the media day on Friday, but the vibe is you get everyone in for the weekend, right? You do the game Saturday, you get people in Friday, you do the game Sunday, whatever, get people in. And WWE, we did New Orleans. That was great. Again, everything kind of in proximity there. When they do it in LA or New York, or, it's a little more spread out. So it really is good having those central locations. Like you said, Orlando, there's touristy stuff to do. That's just far. I mean, it's good. I think they did the best this year. I know they were worried. We had weather concerns, flash flooding concerns all weekend, and obviously that wouldn't have affected the game, but kind of the crowd with that and the tailgates. I know Jason had the live check-in from the show with the tailgates. Did you happen to see any of that walking over? Because I kind of Ubered right into the press box to go up inside.
Yeah, I scanned around. I walked to the stadium, but I walked around some of the parking lot. I think by that point it had dispersed, and a lot of people had started to kind of move on in. I'm not sure if that was because of potential weather, but actually it held up the entire weekend. But there was always kind of like that ominous thought of like, all right, is it going to start raining? Is there going to be thunder and lightning? I don't know. But yeah, the most of the tailgating we saw was on your live stream. I did not witness that personally when I walked in. I was sort of taking care of some other things before I started my way over to the game.
We were tired. Yeah,
It'd been a long weekend.
So I asked the question on the stream. Prelims have come out, right? It was like 1.34 for, I believe, the third hour of that showing. It was like a 1.25, and then it was like a 1.23, and then the 1.34. We'll see if those get adjusted up. The USFL ones got bumped up. That was about in line with what I would expect. I mean, I wouldn't say there was tremendous interest. Spoiler alert, like I can kind of gauge with viewership on the YouTube channel. Like when we went to the Grey Cup, when we're shooting up 10,000 views during the game, I'm like, okay, this is probably going to rate really well tomorrow when the ratings come out, right? It just correlates. There's more people. You're getting a fraction of those. I could see the numbers we had watching from the kickoff show versus the the championship game. It kind of in line. Do you feel like we made it, or we just made it to the championship game here?
I think we made it to the championship game. I think that's the overall impression that I get. As far as the ratings go, I mean, I think now people are going to compare it to the USFL championship game ratings from last year, which, were better. But I think that's something to consider as far as like what is the threshold. And this is a conversation we've had a million times. You've had it with Ben Fisher. You've had it with, other individuals who cover the league extensively. It's going to be continued to be talked about as far as like the exposure and what kind of interest you gauge. It is interesting though, at least from what we've gauged so far. I think that people who did watch it, I think were engaged with it, but getting those numbers again, trying to attract that casual audience. I mean, I had a couple of my friends who did tune in and watch it. And I think they had I value their commentary too, because they don't follow it so religiously. I do like talking to people who are not as in it as we are, because they have a different perception, and they have different knowledge, and they have different expectations. I think that's something to consider as well. So how are we going to gauge, getting those casual audiences involved? And based on the numbers, I think the XFL would be the first to say these aren't exactly what we want, but we're encouraged by the baseline level of interest. So, but yeah, to answer your question, yeah, they made it to the championship game. You can't just say they've made it, because there have been leagues who survived 3 or 4 years and then folded.
I think that getting here, I think is huge. We've talked about it on the stream. I think the bye week hurt a lot of that. I just don't know if there's enough. I don't know if there's enough you can do. I think needs to be, and I think it was Anthony. Forgive me if it was you, but on the stream, do the bye week, that first week of March Madness. Take a hiatus. Let's if we're gonna do a bye, I don't think, if you're not going to utilize the media week ahead of the championship game, I just don't. I think you lose any and all momentum in that way. Any different thoughts about that? And then I've got the game stuff here we can pull up.
That's tough. I mean, you need a bye week, because 12 straight weeks of playing football is tough. For teams that actually make it that far, that's really tough. But taking a break at all, I think I came up with the idea a couple of months ago. I thought about this. I don't think I've said this on the stream. I would do bye weeks for every team every week or so, and you have 2 teams that are able to do it. I know you can figure it out with the TV schedule, but I was thinking somewhere between weeks maybe 5 to 7 or 4 to 8 or something like that. You have 2 teams that take off a week each week. So then each one of them has a chance to kind of rest up. And then later on, you start to get into, okay, do we take another bye week for the media, or do we just get straight into the game? I think that would help a lot. Just have a midseason bye week, like, NFL teams do, right? Like, kind of have this like 4 to 8 weeks, like, okay, let's recalibrate. Let's reassess. Let's see what's working and what's not working, right? A team like Arlington could have used that. A team like Houston could have used that. Maybe San Antonio. I think there are teams that could have benefited from having a bye week of just saying, okay, let's slow down and see what's going on here. I think that to me would be the move, is having a set of weeks, 4 weeks, where 2 teams get a bye week each week, and then everyone's had their rest.
Kind of a rotating CFL does that, obviously with the 9 teams, and every team gets a bye. I don't know if you need a midseason break and then you come back for, season 2, part 2 or whatever. But the week before, I think proved not fruitful if they're not going to take advantage of it the way that I think they could have. I mean, I know The Rock did the pivot and stuff, but I just think that there was, and I know we're getting through this year, I just think that there's more beneficial uses we could have for that. We can talk more about that. John Christian says, definitely like the idea of a bye during March Madness. You use Andy's idea during, so maybe we do a rolling bye weeks, kind of the month of March. I don't think that's a bad idea. He also says if they had gotten less than $1 million, that would be cause for concern. They should be able to work with us. Let's talk some game. We can always kind of vamp more at the end. How do I pull this up here? There we go. We talked about it all week. I mean, everyone took DC. Everyone took DC. Max was texting me, calling for Emery Hunt's head for his besmirchment of Luis Perez and the Renegades. This was a really good game. I was in the press box. The crowd was hot. I think Mike posted, Mike Mitchell, 22,000 and change, 700 something for the crowd. They seemed invested. I will say some of even the press box seemed maybe more invested than maybe you should. I thought we were in the press box. We were supposed to talk, but in the San Antonio press box, you are part of the arena. You're not closed off. It's glass, but it's open. So you do, which I really liked because I felt like I was still part of the game watching experience. We talked a little bit about, people coming in. What did you make of the crowd? Hot, not? You were there, kind of third row on the 50-yard line.
The crowd definitely warmed up as the game went on. I think they started to wake up, especially with all the action. I'm kind of impressed by how many different kinds of fans showed up. Something that you've experienced and we've talked about with the CFL is, and what all the CFL people talk about is, you get all these fans from all these different teams, even if their team's not in it, coming to the game. Well, the same thing happened here. I'm seeing St. Louis fans. I'm seeing Orlando fans. I'm seeing Houston fans. I'm seeing people from all over the league going to this game. That's great. That camaraderie is awesome. There's people who want to be there for various reasons. There were San Antonio fans, obviously. There's a guy heckling the Arlington team. He had this anti-Arlington Renegades sign the entire time, and he was having a back and forth with Kevin Anderson and a couple of the Renegades players, just pointing at the scoreboard the entire time. Like, the energy was definitely there. I was very, very happy with the energy overall with some of the fans. Some of them, I think were more, knowledgeable about what was going on more than others, but you're going to get that, right? Like, especially with the Dew League. No, I mean, it was really cool. I think the attendance number is good. I think it was actually a little bit better than I was expecting. I was expecting about 20,000. It was 22,000. That's great. But look, to get into the game itself, this is not the same team I saw at the end of March. I saw Arlington and San Antonio in Arlington, and to me, that game was like the death of football. The offense was atrocious. Drew Plitt and Counselor were not getting it done. San Antonio was having their own problems on offense. Those games, those back-to-back weeks with Arlington and San Antonio were brutal to watch. Those were probably the most unwatchable games of the entire season. Anthony could probably attest to that. He had to go through all that. This Arlington team, night and day difference. Unbelievable on offense. Luis Perez is the Spring King. He's cemented his legacy through this game. He was incredible. I've seen him in person 3 times, and each time he's just gotten better. Like, he just looks better and better as time goes on, and he accumulates all this knowledge. I can't believe that was the same team I watched a month and a half ago. It didn't look like it because they were just firing on all cylinders on offense.
It was so cool. And I'll just pull up here. I got the video. We were able to get down on the sidelines. Danny did the trophy presentation to Coach Stoops, and then obviously The Rock was there. He gave Luis the MVP award. I did want to say, I forgot that I liked how visible both Danny and DJ were during the game. They did the crowd, and they came down, talked to the media before the game. Danny expressed sincere thanks to everyone there for covering the game. Felt very sincere, right? Like, thank you guys. Because again, I think that we went into the season maybe like, what are the expectations of coverage we're going to get? Okay, now we're kind of seeing like how we exist in this space. I liked how they came down on the field at the end. Arlington gave DJ The Rock, a hat to put on. I thought, what a cool moment for Luis Perez here after, 5-6 years of all of this, everything he's gone through. And, I still remember, the teaching, learning how to play quarterback on YouTube, and having his family run routes for him on the field so he could pick up the new playbook before he was going to the new team. To be able to stand here and kind of be more or less one of the faces of this league, and kind of getting his, accolades acknowledged. I just think it's incredible. I was just over the moon for him. I know we talked about this yesterday when we were hanging out, but really couldn't have a nicer guy have this happen to. Not that there's not 100 different players in the league that deserve it, but really glad with everything Luis has gone through. He got this.
I'm immensely proud of him, and it makes me proud as a fellow San Diegan. Luis Perez coming from Chula Vista, California, right down the road from me. And for him to just go through all of this, all the different trials and tribulations for all the different leagues and all the different starting, losing his job and getting his job back and playing through all these different offenses. And I mean, this is also a culmination of all of his hard work. And he's lost some big games too. He lost the TSL championship game for the Jousters. He lost that semifinal playoff game with the Generals last year. And finally, he breaks down the door here, and he looked fantastic. Again, he has looked better than ever. He looks so in sync with this offense. If Luis Perez was on this team at the beginning of the year, Arlington would have won the South. I'm sorry, Houston fans, but this Arlington team just looked fantastic. They have the defense, they had the special teams, and now they finally have the offense. And the big part of that is because of Luis Perez and his ability to be so calm, so measured in all these different situations, being able to take what they were not doing well on offense and be able to improve on it every single week. And I mean, again, he was just hitting every pass. Like on Saturday, he was hitting downfield passes, he was in intermediate routes. He almost got sacked on the first drive, and he managed to kind of flip it right out and get it out of his hands. And from that moment on, it was kind of like he was just in control of the entire game. But yeah, he's a great person. We ran into his brother actually on the Riverwalk, and he was a really nice guy. When they were looking around for something to eat, and I was kind of hoping that we'd run into Perez because it didn't happen. But he's a guy that I can't help but root for. I try not to be too biased in terms of certain players I follow on teams and all that, but I root for the guy. He's great, and I'm so happy for him that he was able to accomplish this. And like you were saying to me, a couple of days ago, getting the trophy from The Rock. Are you kidding me? That's a life highlight. That's an amazing accomplishment that very, 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 very few people in their life are going to be able to say when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I have Heimbach, him tweeting out. He was a friend of the show, came on over the summer. He won. He was a, O-line back in the 01 with the Extreme. I like seeing that a lot full circle. Some of these, Anthony, I have one more I'm going to get to, but, Anthony, getting the, think of the journey Anthony's been on covering this, all of that. Obviously, Nate, all this. This was the one, the Renegades showing the Cowboys what they're supposed to do in the playoffs. Oh no. Okay, that's what I got to do. But this one up here, I thought, and Luis had one as well. Taylor Ursulino, he's a friend of the show. I don't know if he's ever been on the show, but he's certainly a friend of the podcast. Getting to, roll in the confetti with his child, just the coolest moment in the world. I just thought, here was one. We got Luis Perez here with his family as well. I mean, this is a moment he's never going to forget. I don't know if Luis ever takes another snap of football, if he comes back next year, if he transitions into being a coach, but just an incredible journey for him, and I'm just really proud of everything with Luis.
Honestly, I have to say this. He's probably going to get looked at by another NFL team, but selfishly, I want him back in this league or some iteration of spring football and playing and starting. I mean, after seeing him on Saturday, all I can think about is what would he look like for an entire year under this offense? Like if he came back with this same team and with Stoops and everything, it would be a completely different story. This would not be a below 500 team, in my opinion. I mean, obviously the roster is going to change. There's going to be defensive players that move on, special team players, and other pieces that kind of move here and there. But, for me, I mean, I'm selfish. I want to see him keep playing because he's only 28 and he's already accomplished so much. I mean, he could just walk off right now, and he has, again, cemented his legacy. He doesn't have to stay. But, I think just seeing all of the players and all the energy and all the emotion they had, again, I was sitting right behind the Renegades bench, and those were the jolliest lads I'd seen in quite some time. Kevin Anderson, again, was just having the time of his life. Seeing all the defensive linemen just get really into it. The offensive linemen and Heimbach did such an amazing job with this group. I mean, they kicked ass on Saturday. They played so well, getting good holes for Davion Smith and protecting Perez. Heimbach has to be just so proud of his work and his ability to perform so well. I mean, he's a multi-time champion in multiple leagues now. I mean, his resume is really just so impressive, as is Stoops too. I mean, you can't forget about Stoops as well. What he's able to do to come back after COVID, after all that happened, and be able to coach this team and come back and do this a second time around is also just such an accomplishment.
Max has a question here. To be fair, Houston would have been a lot different if they still had, Kirkland. What do you make of that? If we had to redo, knowing what we know and how good the Renegades looked in the championship game, at replaying that South Division playoff game with Houston with kind of their full roster?
I'd have to agree. I mean, Kirkland was a huge part of it, and it changed the season. When he got hurt in week 5, things changed. When Arlington traded for Luis, things changed. Like that's your nexus point for the South and for really the entire season. My only thing I think about though with Houston is just they seem to have so much confusion as far as what they were doing at quarterback. You know, Brandon Silvers is in and out of the lineup. I know he got hurt. I'm not sure what his role is or was in that semifinal game. It was really bizarre. I don't think we know the full story behind that. Cole McDonald just couldn't get it done. It was just too inconsistent. Obviously, there was a lot going back and forth between him and AJ Smith. I mean, Houston clearly lost something. Obviously, with John Trey Kirkland not being there didn't help, but something chemistry wise just was completely thrown off the second half of the season. They just could not get anything going on offense. They lost something and Arlington gained something. You know, that's what I'm saying about this bye week thing. You really could use it for some of these teams where they start to realize, okay, what's going on here? Because it's hard to kind of readjust for that week to week. You try to have to figure it out. But yeah, I mean, Houston, they probably would be here. I mean, in this case, because Luis Perez came on late, probably. But you know, again, it's hard to say because their quarterback play was really inconsistent down the stretch.
Just speaking of sliding doors here and kind of everything else, I was sitting and I guess I just didn't put the connection together because obviously the Seattle Kraken were playing the Dallas Stars. Game 6 must win for the Kraken there Saturday night. I did have the game up on my phone during the especially during some of the timeouts. It was some of the TV timeouts. I know obviously the injured cameraman and that was not funny. I'm glad that he is doing well. I did hear the whole story about that and that was a very scary moment. But I felt like some of the pop and circumstance at the beginning. I'm like, okay, I'm watching. They have the game on in the corner watching whatever. But what was interesting to me was, a lot of the Dallas media there were very interested in the game, right? A lot of the San Antonio media, a lot of the, because obviously it's the Dallas Stars against the Seattle Sea Dragons. I thought, man, if Seattle had beat DC and you had the Sea Dragons versus the Renegades in the championship game with both Seattle and Dallas being, playing that game 6 elimination game, they dodged a bullet with that because I will say a lot of the people there because I don't know, I'm like, oh, San Antonio, like, oh no, we're Dallas Stars fans or we're from Dallas here covering the game, like we are Dallas Stars fans, because I really thought I was going to be the only one that even cared that the NHL game was on. So I think they avoided that, and they were sliding doors that got the game to that where we had events here that pushed it back. But XFL could have really been in trouble there if Seattle had been the North team and had gone up against Arlington, Dallas, whatever. I think that would have been interesting.
I mean, this is the toughest challenge for them going forward. How are they going to compete with all these leagues, and how do they make themselves the priority over all these established leagues? The NHL, like you've been saying to me a couple of times, there was no Kraken in 2020. They didn't exist. Now they are. That's changed the market. Seattle is a different market now than it was back in 2020. It's a deal. It matters. I think about that too. I've talked about that. Like obviously I go on and on about San Diego getting a team, but like the reality is too, San Diego keeps adding teams. There is a distinct possibility that an MLS team is going to come here soon, and that changes the dynamic. All these markets have different competing interests. And that also goes for the local interest too. We're not just talking about getting casual viewers. We're talking about getting your market involved with it too. That's something that the XFL really has to pin down and really work on next year. They really do. Look, you got St. Louis. Great. Awesome. They don't have a team. They don't have a football team. DC, everyone hated Dan Snyder and no one wanted to support the Commanders. Maybe that changes now in the near future. But, people got behind DC and they support them. That's great. But how are you going to get the Seattle audience back now? Get Orlando really involved, which traditionally Florida teams are kind of hit and miss, with their engagement. San Antonio should be, right? San Antonio doesn't have any teams. They should be a stronger market. Houston, obviously, they have a lot of competing interests as well. My point being is you just have to make sure that these entities are invested in. You're going to have to put more money. Probably more of their money is going to have to go into that than anything else, honestly. The local marketing is really going to have to be a big emphasis point for them going forward, especially if they're going to be in the hub model and they're not just going to be walking around during the week. That again, if that's the case, if that's what you're going to do, fine. But you need to put more resources into devoting yourself to these local markets.
Max says that dude left it. The star slogan is Texas hockey for a reason. Right? Yeah, but all they, I know that's like their hashtag. All they scream at the game is "Go Stars, go Star." It's kind of with the Knights too. They like "Go Knights, go." Some of the hockey chants are very very kind of simplistic there. Back to the game for a little bit here because I get sidetracked on these live shows. DC, speaking of Seattle, kicked the absolute snot out of us. I was there, and we relived the beer steak and all that. You were not on the show the week that I got. I think Evan was reliving my horrors of the beer steak that week. But I mean, DC looked like a different team on Saturday. They didn't even look. It didn't really feel competitive. It felt like Arlington DC was able to keep it close a little bit, but it felt like Arlington was never really in danger the entire game. I know you were tweeting that Arlington has DC all figured out. There's nothing Greg Williams can do that they're not expecting. What did you make of DC that looked, I mean, obviously it looked like the best team all season kind of having this game?
They had their worst day. And I think that was confirmed with some of the DC faithful that I talked to as well. Nate, one of the guys that joined us in the Alamo tour, he agreed. He was just like, this is the worst they looked all season. I mean, they just were lost. And the thing about it is Greg Williams was kind of playing with fire down the stretch. If you look back on it, I mean, there were a lot of quarterbacks that had some outstanding performances against him down the stretch. Quinn Dormady obviously lit him up. Ben DiNucci did it a couple times and should have done it even more in the North Division Championship game. The only problem was that the receivers just couldn't hold on to the ball. But like that was not DiNucci's fault. He had been playing with fire, and finally Arlington was able to expose that. They exposed his over aggressiveness, and they just were able to hit all their passes. I kept saying at some point, like, he has to stop blitzing, but I don't think he knows any other method, right? He plays with his hair on fire. He coaches with his hair on fire, and it finally bit him in the butt. And as for DC on offense, man, I mean, that whole first quarter, like, you get negative yards. You don't even have the ball, like, for more than a minute. The entire first quarter, that really set them behind as well. They just could never get the run game going. They were so adamant about passing the ball. And I know they did it a lot in the second half too, because they were behind, but they were kind of out the gate trying to throw the ball. And Tomo didn't have his worst performance, I think, because I know the 3 interceptions look bad. That last one was the 4th down conversion, which wasn't going to go through, and it was kind of obvious for Arlington. It was easy for them to hone in on. But clearly, like, look, Arlington's defense is good. They've been good all year. Like, I'm not surprised they got those turnovers. Anthony Miller did a great job pointing out how they've gotten a turnover every single game they played in this season, and they usually get multiple turnovers. So I'm not surprised there. But I mean, for DC, yeah, it was just the worst timing for them to have the worst game of the year. And part of it was the great game plan by Arlington, but other part of it too was they just weren't able to adjust to what was going on the other side, either on defense or on offense. And I don't think any lesser of them. They are still a great team. I still think they're worthy of winning the championship, but they just didn't show up on Saturday.
I mean, they had -1 yards the first quarter. -1 yards. And I mean, I think Arlington had like 97 or 100. I mean, it was, watching from it was kind of cool there. I did like in the San Antonio, they had, obviously you have your TV feed, but they had a really good kind of scoreboards going throughout. I thought was helpful for kind of keeping track up there. Cause sometimes in the press box, you get a little lost with like, okay, what the hell's going on here? But it just, if you had told anyone, I know so much was made and you kind of missed the whole playoff skircuffle, whatever that word is, kind of being in kerfuffle, kind of being in, being in Japan and traveling and everything. But if you had told anyone watching the game, Arlington is the 10-1 team. Arlington's the 10-1 team here, and DC is the 4-6 team that happened to get their way into the playoffs. I don't think anyone would have thought any different if you were turning on the game for the first time.
No, I mean, that's the thing. You kind of had to throw the records out. And I know that's a cliche, but it really felt like that during the game. I mean, it didn't seem to matter. Like I said, this Arlington team was not even close to being the same team that I saw a month and a half ago. But again, their offensive game plan was just so solid. Again, like their mix of run and pass was awesome. Luis was super accurate. For DC, I mean, the killer one for them, which is not on the highlight reels, was Chris Blair dropping that pass in the 4th quarter. That was it. Once he dropped that long pass from Tom, because Tomlin was throwing some great deep passes. Don't get me wrong. Like, he hits some of his spots. He hit one to Josh Hammond earlier in the game. Hammond had a great game, by the way. He was awesome. But yeah, that drop by Blair was just absolutely killer. It's something you don't get over, and it just completely destroyed any sense of momentum. And you felt it in the crowd. Everyone just kind of sighed collectively when Blair dropped that ball, and it stopped them from mounting a comeback against Arlington. Because if they get that pass, I mean, you're talking about 35-26 at that point in the game, which is more with about 5 or 6 minutes left in the game, as opposed to a minute, less than 2 minutes, and then having to go for the fourth down conversion. So yeah, that it just after that you knew it just wasn't their night. Like it just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, there was I tweeted in our group chat. I said, "This is the game." I mean, this is the game, and there's some things like that where you just can't get that momentum back. You know, whatever happens, and we've seen that in hockey games and baseball game. Like when the momentum, it just felt like that was their last grasp. It shifted, and I thought because I was sitting there and Dirty was up there, with the X Fan show, we were kind of joking. And, we kept saying like, oh, Arlington's got it. And then, DC would score. It's like, okay. But then Arlington would immediately answer again, come back. It just never felt like the game that DC was playing. Like, oh, yeah, they're going to get 2 touchdowns here in the last 4 minutes and tie the game. Like, it just never felt like that was really kind of like when we had in Seattle with DC for the playoff game. Like, is Seattle really going to get 18 points or whatever here in the last 6 minutes of the game? Like, after playing like absolute dog trash the first 3 quarters? Like, I really don't think so. I don't see the momentum shifting in that way.
I knew DC was going to score in the third quarter because they always do. They always come out with a great second half adjustment and they're able to score in the third quarter. They've been doing it all season. But the difference here again is that Arlington answered. Lenny Brown scored 2 touchdowns in the third quarter. He had a running touchdown and then he had that long touchdown where also DC made a horrendous mistake kicking the ball out of bounds and then giving great field position to the Renegades, which they took advantage of immediately. And Luis Perez was able to hit that pass to Lenny Brown and he ran it in. It was just like, okay, they clearly have the answers for DC. They may score, but they're going to score right back. Like that to me was just the other thing. They were able to weather that storm and take those punches. Even when DC was trying to mount a comeback, Arlington had all the answers. They led from wire to wire. It felt that way, and it never felt in doubt at any point. It never felt like they were just going to do it. The only thing that could have happened for them maybe, again, is if Perez threw a pick, which is what I said on the stream on Saturday. I said if he cannot throw a back-breaking interception in this game because that's going to come back and haunt them. And it didn't happen. Again, Arlington was mistake-free, and their game plan was fantastic, and they had all the answers.
Yeah, there was weird kicking issues the whole game, I thought. I thought it was really weird. We had a couple kickoffs like that. And I'm like, what is like you're in the dome here. We're week 12. Like I just was kind of surprised that there were still kickoff issues here going into the championship game.
A little bit. I mean, maybe it was just the nerves getting to them. It's unfortunate, and that just happened for a couple of different reasons. But I mean, nerves are going to get to you in that kind of game. One of the things that I was immensely impressed by were some of the players who did step up, though. Tyler Vaughn's was awesome. Oh my God, I saw him basically with that sideline catch that he had early in the first quarter, and he got a deep pass from Perez and got smacked out of bounds and held onto the ball. And just the entire sideline was like, yeah, they were all rallying around him. He had the best game of his entire season. Someone like Javonte Payton didn't really show up in this game, but he didn't have to. Again, Sal Cannella caught his first touchdown the entire year. Like Cannella had gotten catches all year, but I was almost like shocked when he got that 40-yard touchdown the first drive. I was like, oh my God, where's that been all season? Like just things that what we had expected didn't happen in this game, right? Again, seeing Arlington's offense, I mean, Arlington could have scored 40 points. Like they had a real opportunity to score 40 points. Their only mistake they really made was when they fumbled that ball in the fourth quarter, but then they were up by too much, and I think DC just was not going to come back. But again, like this game just didn't go chalk. It was completely opposite of our expectations. And yeah, again, you have to give credit to Arlington for just being able to make these adjustments mid-season and even at the end of the season. I mean, they scored 9 points against Houston the last game, and you're still thinking like, this team can't score. There's no way they're going to win next week. This wasn't like something that there wasn't even signs of it at the end of the regular season. The only sign was that, okay, well, they played with DC, but it just never felt like they were going to get it together in time, and miraculously they did.
When Luis and they showed it on, I can't remember if they showed it in the stadium or if I just saw it on Twitter. The Luis's halftime, his halftime locker room cheer. Did they show that in the stadium, or was that just on my Twitter? It's all kind of a blur now.
No, that was only on Twitter. They didn't show that
Okay.
on the highlights package, but I did check it on Twitter during the game, and I thought that was great. I mean, he was just in it.
Well, there's something to be said there where I'm like, this man is going to will this team to win. Like, we're kind of getting that right now with Yanni Gord here with the Kraken, where he's playing and he's been with Tampa and everything. But, you can get, if you're in a position like that to kind of will your team. And I really did feel like Luis is not losing this game. Like, I really felt like he was so locked in. Here's my question for you. And then we'll kind of round out here. We'll get out of here at the hour. Luis Perez won the game. Teamu played better, arguably, during the season. Who do you see now having more success transitioning out? I see Teamu getting signed before Luis Perez. I just think age and everything. What do you make of that with those two quarterbacks?
I think Tom was going to get another shot because I will say this: as much as I am immensely impressed by Perez and his ability to survive all these situations, Tom this season improved the most, just from game to game. I mean, from week one versus your Dragons versus the middle of the season, the end of the season. I mean, he just got better, especially as a deep ball passer. He got way better than he was a few years ago, better than he was in the USFL last year. He just improved immensely, end over end. He is a great athlete. He can run. He has a better sense of being able to dissect defenses. I think his body is probably now more in shape, and he's able to kind of take. I mean, he takes hits. Should he be taking those hits? No, I don't want any quarterback taking those hits, but he's definitely a lot more sturdier than some of his contemporaries. So I think for him, I think he's going to get another opportunity to stay on a squad, and maybe this time he finally stays. Not just floating around on the practice squad. Like maybe he's actually be able to be a third stringer or something. As far as Perez goes, yeah, I think he's kind of maxed out on his potential as far as making a roster. And if he does, great. But again, I think his skill set is best utilized in leagues like this because he's able to just be so versatile and being able to jump from team to team and be able to readjust on the fly. But for Tomo, yeah, I think he has the better NFL prospects, I would say.
Yeah, they got a comment here, Delta. Cardinals should be looking at XFL quarterbacks. Murray won't be back until December. Exactly. It's interesting, and obviously the timeline because DC and Arlington, they're in the championship game. So, that's why DiNucci kind of got the jump start because he was able to go to, do the tryout. But, DiNucci is a little more free with the ball. I would trust the ball a little bit more with Teamu going in there. Where you want that backup role, like just please come in and don't throw away the game. Where I think Ben's really going to have to not try to do as much. I know we talked to DiNucci off the top. I have some comments here as well before we get out. But do you get what I'm saying? Like I don't like DiNucci as that backup just because I don't know if I trust him not to throw away the ball.
He's a gunslinger, and that's the thing. He's going to have to find a way to rein that in. And if there's somebody, again, who's going to do that, it's going to be Sean Payton. Sean Payton will tell you what you're doing right or wrong. He's not afraid to do that. I think if Ben's going to have a chance, he's going to need to listen to him. Because Hazlitt, obviously we made so much about Hazlitt wanting to take, DiNucci out behind the woodshed a few times because of his play style. And, it's funny, it's hilarious, but in the NFL, you can't do that. Like, you need to. I know all these players have bravado, and some of them are able to get their way because of certain concessions that their GM or their owner might make towards them. Kyler Murray is one of those examples. But, with Ben DiNucci, he has to find a way to be able to rein that in because he doesn't have that same leash as some of these other players. That's why he's in this kind of league. He needs to be able to build his pedigree back up and be able to say, hey, I can learn. I can develop. I'm not just going to do it my way. Even though he plays like that, he has to be able to at least show the coaching staff that he's willing to make adjustments as he goes along. So, yeah, if he's going to survive, that's going to have to be an adjustment on his part. And I will say this. Look, there's going to be injuries during the entire season. There's going to be so many injuries during the NFL season. Guys who don't get signed now probably get signed later on because it happens. It's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of the business. And there's going to be coaching staffs and scouts that kind of look at players and say, well, this doesn't really help right now, but, let's keep them on the back burner. And they'll at least have that tape and that exposure now to where if something does happen in the fall, they go, oh no, what do we do? Well, you remember that guy we kind of looked at earlier? Yeah, I do. And then maybe they go back and maybe pick him up because that's going to happen. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be opportunities for these players. May not be right now, and it may not be at the beginning of the season, but at some point during the NFL season, they will have a chance.
Well, also, and you're just not only the tape, but you're just more in game shape. I mean, obviously, you're never in game shape. Game shape. It's not like you've been off football for 2.5 years here. Heineke, the reason why he was able to transition to the Washington football team was because he had just been up to game shape, even not taking snaps for the Battlehawks. A couple questions here before we get out. Jobu has a question. It'll be interesting if they build continuity with the rosters. That's critical to improving the execution and then the end quality of football. If you haven't seen our talk with Terrell Buckley from the live pre-show, all of those interviews are time coded, so you can go back to our live show. Just go and watch that. But we asked Coach Buckley about that, about like what's coming next with showcases, and he was talking about like, well, we're figuring out like how we can retain players and how we're going to rebuild and move that around. So I would check out that if you are interested. Any thoughts on that or Buckley and kind of the retaining players moving forward?
I mean, as far as continuity goes, again, something that we looked at with the USFL this year, and one of the things that I liked was that some of these players were moving, kind of rolling over and playing a little bit better than they were the year before. But look, your top end guys are going to get the opportunities and they're going to be gone. That's just the reality of it. Your best quarterbacks are going to be gone. Your best D linemen, your offensive linemen, your receivers, Ja'Cour Pearson, I don't expect him to come back with Seattle. Would I love him to? Of course. But if he gets the right opportunity, he's gone. Like, he's an immensely talented receiver. And I think for maybe some of the guys who were improving or still kind of finding their way, yeah, you hope they stay on the same roster and you're able to kind of be like, all right, I'm familiar with him. I remember him. He wasn't great, but I do remember him. And that's something that does help going forward. I hope, and I think they will have some continuity there, because it does help with, for fans to get involved with and be able to be invested in as well. So yeah, my answer to that is your top line guys are gone, but if you can have some continuity, that's at least a start. But again, the XFL pitches themselves as the league of opportunity, and a lot of that opportunity is moving them on to the NFL.
Yeah, act my age here. I can't remember which jersey he got. He's a prize winner here. XFL has taken the next step, needs to take the next step now, retain key talent. NFL will sign some players, but most will be available next year. XFL needs to spend money and give key quarterbacks additional money to bring them back. It's always that balance we've talked, and I disagreed with Coach Beck when we talked to him in Arizona. I want every player to get on an NFL roster. Like, that's not realistic, but that's not practical to kind of what you're trying to do here in the league. I do think you want players to get that, the success and those opportunities, but I don't think you still have to be a football league. You still NXT and WWE still has to, put on TV products every week while also getting players up to the main roster. It's a really tough balance. I would look at NXT, and I know we hate Vince McMahon and all of that. NXT now is different. NXT before they did the revamp. It's like, I thought they did a really good job. How do we, we pay a little bit extra. We got like Tommaso Ciampa and stuff here. Like, how do we build storylines that people care about here, but also trying to develop players for the main roster? It is possible. It is possible to do that, but it does take a lot more work.
It does take a lot more work. And let's be realistic. The finances are not there to keep some of these guys around. Some of them, yes, some of them, no. And again, some of these players aren't just fit for the NFL. Some of them are, more geared to be in this league. The same thing happens in the CFL. There's a lot of guys that I see that are great for a CFL roster, but they're not good for an NFL roster. And I think that's going to be the same thing here for the XFL. And we won't know that answer until we get multiple years and we see players who are more committed to this lifestyle and saying, hey, I just want to play in the spring and I don't really want to commit myself to that kind of level of play in the next level. I just want to be able to get out there and play, period, not just be stuck on a practice squad. You're going to have those guys, and that will help your league ultimately. But as far as shelving out more money, that's something that is going to take some time, or at least that'd have to be a hardline discussion with the league ownership. And I don't think that's something they're going to be able to afford right now. So that part of it is tricky. It is a tough balance, right? And it's not something until you get further on down the road of, okay, what's working, what's not, and who's actually willing to stay around. And, I still don't know if that's the case for the USFL, right? Like once we get into year 3, maybe we'll know that. But as far as now, I don't know if most of these guys are still going to be there next year.
We do. Yeah, to mention, it's just talking continuity here. John Christian, Arlington winning it all might throw. Yeah, you were still the playoff change. I don't know. I mean, if Arlington had come in and crapped the bed, it'd be different. Here before we get out, so the Tom Hardy meme where he's like, That's bait. Here we go. This is Jobu wants to know, how about we get Andy on the record predicting how many players will get NFL contracts? USFL, I believe they're claiming 60. I think that some players that like double dipped or weren't necessarily on rosters that were signed. I believe XFL 2020 had like 70, right? If I and please do not read straight. And Mike has all of those numbers, but USFL had 50, I think, kind of more or less, and then obviously Cavante Turpin and all of that. What do you think with the XFL here?
It's so hard to predict because of how many players stick around in the NFL and some who get replaced by these other players. We'll know the quality of how much all of this preparation and all this playing time in the spring really benefits them. I mean, I guess it would be somewhere around the same number, 60 to 70. That would be my guess, because it really depends on, the practice squad is really the biggest thing, right? Like getting on the main roster is really hard to do, but getting on a practice squad is more feasible. So somewhere between 60 to 70, that would be my guess when it's all said and done. I'm going to have to stay in that ballpark number, because otherwise it's just really hard to keep predicting that these guys are going to retain. And mind you, there's still XFL players from, several years ago that are still on these rosters, right? I mean, PJ Walker's still floating around. Heineke's still floating around. Some of these other guys are still hanging around from a few years ago. So now you're talking about XFL players replacing the XFL players from a few years ago. Like, the competition just gets tough. So, yeah, I mean, I'd say at best 60 to 70, conservatively 30 to 40, because again, I don't know how many roster spots there really are located. I have to look at each practice squad and kind of reevaluate that. So ceiling is 60 to 70, floor is 30 to 40.
This was what I was thinking this morning, and I think that obviously XFL 2020 exists in the vacuum, right? Half a season done, COVID, that exists in the vacuum. USFL last year exists in the vacuum as well, because that, there was no competing league. They were the funnel line in if you were trying to get. I think this year, both XFL and USFL will be lower than the USFL had, right? Because like you've talked about, we're doubling down, we're piling up. But my question is, if let's say XFL got 35, does USFL get 15, or does XFL, if XFL gets 40, does USFL? Because again, playing later, you're now, if we're competing against XFL 2020 backlog, USFL 2022, XFL now, and then USFL, like you're piling on that. And there are only so many spots. So that's my thing. And I'm sure people will trumpet USFL 2020 versus XFL 2023. I don't think that's a fair comparison, just because of, there, like I just said. But any other thoughts on that before we get out?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's so much competition now. This is the first time we've had two leagues that have players that can get signed. We've never had this before. And so I think that's something that I don't know. There's no really straight answer for that. The only thing that would ever improve that is if we had more NFL teams, obviously, which is a very distinct possibility. We've been hearing things about that coming from that league, and potentially players playing in Europe and all that. But as far as right now, I mean, yeah, it's probably going to be less players than people expect, because there's all that backlog, and there's all the teams, and there's all the players that had already been signed from last year and from 2020 and those other iterations, even maybe like TSL players, that were signed as well. So with that in mind, it's really hard to predict it being the same exact numbers as it has been in the past. This is all new data for us, and it's all new extenuating circumstances. This picture, that's why it's so tough for us, because the picture keeps evolving, keeps changing. There's a lot of speculation, because this is all unprecedented. This is new for us. This is new territory.
In the words of Roddy Piper, just when you think you've got the answers, I change the question. So we'll do that. We're going to get out. I've got to get my life, my suitcases and stuff unpacked now. If you're not a hockey fan, Arlington, you've won the title here. Let's give goodwill to the Kraken tonight. We have a pivotal Game 7. I got to go to the watch party over at Climate Pledge. Big time there. Big time show coming up this week. I just confirmed with Cole Kublik going to be coming on. Cole was on the sidelines. Get Cole kind of a post retrospective of the championship game, the XFL season. I got Jim Mullen coming on as well, talking CFL and all the U sports, the SFU, kind of all that stuff. Jim's got thoughts on the XFL, the USFL. And then I'm trying to work with Mike. Mike's really busy trying to get Mike scheduled coming on either this week, next week, kind of like, XFL 2023 in retrospective. Andy, should I give away who our big USFL guest is on the podcast, or should I tease that out? Because
No, keep teasing. No, I as much as I love to open my Christmas gift early, keep teasing it.
Okay, well, we have a big special USFL guest coming up this week. I know we did lots of XFL talk today. I did not watch a second of USFL football this weekend. I did see that Philadelphia won the game with 8 field goals. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but they did win. They set a record, I guess.
A professional football record, yeah, 8 field goals. That's just immense.
Well, it's real football, Andy. It's real football. They got real football records.
Well,
They got real. Andy, anything else from you? It was great to see Andy in person again. We had a lot of fun. Like I've told you, off mic, I appreciate all of your help. Everything else, obviously, Anthony, everyone for the live show, and Matthew, and Fran, and Jared hanging out, and everything else. Anything else from you before we get out of here?
I just want to say, I mean, it was tremendous to see you and everybody there, and also just be able to experience that community in full force. Being able to see it like that, that's something I just imagined I wouldn't be a part of a few years ago. And again, just see it just so formed out, and to see where it's going. Can it improve? Can it be even better in the future? I really do believe it can be. But from where we've started and where we've gotten to at this point, it was so cool to be part of that experience. I will never forget it. And I just want to continue seeing more and more improvements like that in the future. But yeah, I can't wait to do more of these because it was so fun. And I hope this continues. There's real potential in this. There really is. I think there's a place for this. And I will trumpet it forever until my last breath.
Chris here, acting my age. We did a whole breakdown. Go back, just rewind the stream. We did the whole breakdown. We got everybody, 6 players, the XFL so far, and probably still maybe more have come down since I've been on the stream. But we had 6 when we started. We've been here for an hour. So there you go. They said on the pivot that planning for 2024 starts today. Thanks again, everyone at XFL, rolling out the red carpet as always for us and Anthony, and getting to participate in all of that stuff. And I know that Andy would have been a part of that. He was busy traveling and applying for all that. We get through everything. I appreciate everyone. Check out the show Friday. And I think that's it. We'll, how do I get the heck out of here? We will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.